The gym floor echoed with sneakers and laughter. That kind of teenage noise that always feels like it's hiding something cruel. At the edge of the court, Layla Monroe stood still. Her hoodie zipped up, her eyes calm, her silence louder than any scream. "Yo, black girl," a boy sneered, tossing a basketball with too much spin. "You even know how to dribble? Or is that not part of your culture?" She didn't answer. She didn't flinch. She just turned, slow and deliberate, and walked off the court like it didn't belong to her but couldn't own her either. Before we dive deeper, if you believe stories like this matter, stories about black girls who rise, who endure, who respond without rage but with silent power, go ahead and subscribe. This space is for truth, for strength, for us. Now, let's go back to the first day, to the first cut, before the gym, before the taunts, before they learned who she really was. Let's begin with where it all started, her first step into Riverside High. The school building looked like something out of a brochure. Red bricks, clean windows, flags fluttering just enough to look proud but not defiant. It was supposed to say, "You are safe here." But as Layla Monroe stepped off the bus, the air told a different story. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, hoodie pulled just below her eyebrows. Her braid touched the small of her back like a tether to everything she had been taught to carry: restraint, grace, danger wrapped in calm. Kids poured out of cars with names embroidered on sports jackets, hair the color of summer wheat, lips glossed with privilege. They didn't look at her directly, but they saw her. Oh, they saw her. One boy nudged another and nodded in her direction. They both chuckled, low and sharp. Not cruel yet, but primed. Layla walked through the double doors, past a display of honor roll photos. None of the faces looked like hers. None had her skin, her eyes, her stillness. She noted that silently. In homeroom, the teacher mispronounced her name, Layla. "Layla," she said, quietly. Not correcting, just stating. A small reclaiming of her mother's voice, who had whispered it to her like a lullaby on nights when the world felt too much. A girl in the second row whispered something into her friend's ear. They giggled. Layla sat down in the back, hands folded, face unreadable, not invisible, just unwilling to be read. And still, she felt it, the itch behind the neck, the pulse of 1,000 judgments forming before she'd spoken more than 2 words. They didn't know her, but they had decided she was different. That was enough. The bell rang, loud and sharp. She exhaled once, slowly, and began her day. Third period came like a test she hadn't studied for. In biology, the teacher passed around frog specimens for dissection. The smell of formaldehyde bit at the inside of her nose, but she didn't flinch. Layla had learned early that flinching gave people a reason to call you weak or weird. The white boy sitting next to her, Tyler or Trey, some name that sounded like the color of sneakers, looked at her and wrinkled his nose. "Bet you've done this before," he said under his breath. "You people eat stuff like this, right?" His friend across the lab chuckled. Layla didn't respond. She simply reached for the scalpel and began the cut, clean and precise. Not on the boy, on the frog. She heard the whispers grow legs. "She's so serious. She's kinda scary. Why does she always wear that hoodie?" The room swelled with commentary disguised as curiosity. She became the subject of a quiet study, her hair, her silence, the way she didn't laugh when others did. When the teacher assigned group partners, Layla noticed the pattern. They paired quickly, everyone else, then her. By the time names were called, she was the leftover. The teacher gave an awkward smile. "Layla, you can join Jessica's group." Jessica didn't smile. She blinked, then turned back to her worksheet, whispering something Layla couldn't hear but felt. It landed heavy and cold. Layla took her seat beside them. She knew this part. It was the choreography of exclusion, no open hostility, just the absence of warmth. She wasn't new to it, but today it hit different. Maybe because it was all so casual, so ordinary. And yet, it cut. Lunch was noise, the kind that fills every inch of space and still makes you feel alone. Layla walked through the cafeteria, tray in hand, scanning for a place to sit. Tables weren't just places to eat here. They were borders, territories. You had to be invited. She wasn't. She ended up at the corner table near the trash bins, alone. Again. As she ate, she could feel eyes on her, not out of interest, but calculation, like people trying to guess how long she'd last here, like she was a temporary thing. She unwrapped her sandwich slowly, every motion deliberate. Her mother once told her, even when the world watches you like a threat, move like you belong there. Because you do. A girl walked past her, holding a tray stacked with chips and soda. Their eyes met for half a second. The girl smirked. "You always look mad," she said, not stopping. "Maybe try smiling. You're in America now." Layla didn't look up. She took a bite of her sandwich, chewed, swallowed. She wanted to scream. Not words, but memories. Of nights she studied extra hard to make her mother proud. Of how she braided her hair herself every Sunday. Of every book she'd read to escape being misunderstood. But silence was the only protest she trusted. Later that day, in the hallway between Last Bell and Freedom, a custodian pushed his mop past her. He was older, black, quiet. Their eyes met for a moment, not in pity, but recognition. A nod passed between them. "You're not crazy, you're just awake." That night, Layla sat at the edge of her bed, hoodie still on, notebook open, but blank. She didn't write. She just stared. The weight of that first day sat on her chest like an invisible backpack. And then, without a word, she stood up, stepped into the garage, and began her kata. The basement always smelled of eucalyptus oil and old pine. Layla Monroe kept it that way, clean, sparse, intentional. The mat was faded at the corners. The punching bag hung like a silent sentinel. In this room, there were no mirrors, only muscle memory and breath. Layla was 8 the first time she stood barefoot on that mat, arms stiff at her sides, her braid still damp from the shower upstairs. Her mother didn't yell. Tanya never raised her voice, not even when Layla fumbled the stance or twisted too early in a kick. Instead, she'd pause, tilt her head, and say, "Again." Layla hated that word, but she did it. Again and again. Because there was something about her mother's quiet that demanded more than noise ever could. There were no medals hanging in the room, no certificates framed on the walls, just a photo Tanya in uniform, standing between two men with faces hard as iron. Layla didn't know the full story of that picture yet, but she could feel the weight of it, the discipline it carried. That night, Tanya had said, "You can't stop the world from throwing punches, baby, but you can choose when to let it land." Layla had asked, "Why do I need to learn how to fight if you want me to be calm?" Her mother smiled faintly, tapping the middle of Layla's chest with 2 fingers. "Because one day, someone's gonna look at this black skin of yours and think it means you're angry or dangerous. And when that day comes, I want you to be ready to stay still when they expect you to strike. That's power." She didn't understand it then, but her mother moved like someone who'd had to survive things she'd never speak of. A woman who had seen war, but raised her daughter to win battles without making a sound. The kata they practiced was slow, graceful. Hands curved like waves. Breath matched to movement. It wasn't about fighting. It was about not needing to. That was the night Layla stopped asking why they trained in silence. She started listening to what silence could teach her. By the time she was 10, Layla could finish a full kata blindfolded. Not because it was expected, but because her mother once told her, "There'll be days when you don't get to see what's coming, but your body will know. Trust it." So she learned to trust. The twist of her hips in a sidekick. The whisper of breath before a strike. The stillness before everything moved again. Each night, under the soft buzz of the old fluorescent light, she trained. And her mother watched not with judgment, but with the kind of still intensity that made Layla stand taller. They didn't talk much during those sessions. But afterward, when the sweat dried and the tea steeped in chipped mugs, they'd sit together at the kitchen counter. Sometimes Tanya would speak in fragments about her time in the sand, about soldiers who didn't come home, about silence being a way to keep certain memories from becoming monsters. One day, Tanya said once, "You'll walk into a room and feel like you don't belong, not because you did anything wrong, but because the room was built without you in mind. When that happens, you hold your ground, Layla. You breathe. You don't shrink." Layla had nodded then, not fully understanding but storing it somewhere between her ribcage and spine. There were mornings when Tanya braided her daughter's hair before school, fingers calloused but gentle. On those days, she'd hum old soul tunes under her breath, never singing, just murmuring. Layla never asked what the songs were. She just let them wrap around her like armor. Sometimes they'd spar gently, mother and daughter, sweat and laughter mixing like honey and ash. Tanya always let Layla win, but never easily, because she wanted her to know that earning power meant understanding it wasn't about domination but presence. "I'm not teaching you to fight," her mother said one Sunday. "I'm teaching you not to be shaken." Layla carried that sentence like scripture. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where Texas air pressed against windows like a heavy truth no one wanted to speak aloud. The basement was dim, except for one lamp in the far corner. Layla had just turned 12 that week. Tanya didn't say they were training that night. She didn't say anything at all. Layla had come down looking for her sketchpad, still wearing her school uniform, socks bunched at the ankles. As she bent to pick it up, a blur came toward her from the side, a soft rustle of motion. Instinct took over. She dropped, pivoted, and swept her leg low. Tanya stepped back just in time, grinning. Layla blinked. "You tried to disrupt you," her mother said. "Not hurt you." Layla's breath came fast, her palms tingling. She wasn't angry. She was awake. "You passed," Tanya said simply, folding her arms. "You saw what wasn't said." They sat on the mat afterward, silence stretched between them like fabric being ironed smooth. Then Tanya said something she hadn't before. "You know, silence is a language, and most folks are terrified of it, because in silence, they hear their own thoughts too clearly." Layla looked up at her mother. "So, what do we do with it?" Tanya paused. "Then we make it ours." That night, she handed Layla a folded piece of cloth, a belt. Not black, not yet, but a deep shade of indigo. "This ain't about rank," she said. "It's about readiness. You ready to carry yourself differently now?" Layla tied the belt slowly, fingers trembling not from fear, but reverence. She looked in the mirror upstairs later, wearing it over her hoodie. It wasn't flashy. No one else would even know what it meant. But she knew. At school the next day, when a boy mimicked her walk behind her back, Layla didn't stop or turn or roll her eyes. She smiled to herself. He didn't know. He didn't need to. She was already stronger than the insult. And in the stillness of not responding, she had already won. There's a particular sound to locker rooms, not the echo of doors slamming or the squeak of sneakers on tile, but the click of belonging. The way laughter folds and unfolds between girls who have known each other since they wore braces and lip gloss in the same shade of pink. Layla stood at the far end of the locker room, peeling off her gym shirt with slow, efficient movements. Her braid hung low today, coiled neatly at the nape of her neck. She had used coconut oil that morning, the kind her grandmother once swore by, thick, golden, and softening everything it touched. She didn't notice the whisper at first. It slipped through the steam like static. "Smells like someone bathed in a bakery." A few girls laughed, not loud, just enough for her to hear, just enough for her to wonder. Layla froze, shirt half folded in her hand. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. She simply placed it on the bench and sat down, calmly untying her sneakers. Behind her, someone muttered, "She always acts like she's too good to talk to anyone." Another chimed in, mockingly sweet. "Maybe she doesn't speak English. Do you think she's from Africa or something?" Laughter again. Soft. Slippery. Designed not to be heard by teachers but loud enough to lodge beneath the skin. Layla tied her shoes tighter. Too tight. The laces bit into the top of her foot, but she needed that pressure, that anchor. She had trained for moments like this, not with words, but with breath. A sudden click cut through the noise. She turned, eyes scanning. One of the girls, blonde, high ponytail, phone out, was pretending to snap selfies. Camera angled too wide, too obvious. Layla locked eyes with her. No words, just stillness. The girl smirked and shrugged. "Relax. It's just a pic." A picture, taken without consent, weaponized in the blink of an eye. Layla stood up, not in defiance, just to leave. And as she passed the mirror near the exit, she caught her reflection. Not messy, not angry, just composed, unreadable, like her mother. That night, she didn't mention it over dinner. Tanya wouldn't have asked anyway. She never pried she read posture, eye movements, the tempo of breathing. But as Layla washed the dishes, she scrubbed the same plate 3 times. And when she lay in bed later, she opened her phone, stared at the screen, and deleted every picture she'd ever posted of herself. Not because she was ashamed, but because tonight, she remembered they didn't need her to make noise to try and break her. All they needed was access. And all she needed was to take it back. Monday came with a breeze and a silence that didn't feel clean. It clung to the hallway like perfume sprayed over rot. Layla walked into school like she always did, early, alone, hoodie on, eyes down just enough to avoid questions, but never shame. And yet, the air felt different. It started with a look. The boy who usually sat 2 rows behind her in history stared longer than necessary. His gaze didn't wander. It lingered as if he knew something he shouldn't, and was waiting to see if she knew that he knew. Then came the whispers. Little fragments. "Did you see it?" "No." But she looked. It was on Jenna's story for like an hour. By second period, Layla knew the photo had been posted. It wasn't obscene, but it was intentional. A wide-angle selfie with her in the background, half undressed, blurry but identifiable. The kind of image that didn't need to say much because the comment section would do the rest. She didn't follow Jenna. She didn't follow anyone. But someone had taken a screenshot. A girl in chemistry, barely meeting her eyes. Slipped it under her notebook like a note passed in wartime. Layla glanced at it, just long enough to understand, just long enough to feel that acidic mix of violation and clarity. She handed it back. "Thanks," she said, voice even, calm. The girl blinked, confused by the absence of rage, as if Layla's quiet made her complicit in her own humiliation. In truth, Layla felt the scream clawing at her throat. She wanted to hurl a desk, break a phone, call her mother, run home, but she didn't. Because power, real power, was not letting the scream be the only story they told about you. At lunch, she sat in her usual corner, alone. No one approached. No one said her name. But the way they didn't speak, it was louder than cruelty. She ate every bite of her sandwich slowly, precisely like ritual. She imagined herself in the dojo, barefoot on the mat, moving through the quiet. And in that stillness, she remembered what her mother once said: "Don't give them the performance they paid for. Give them silence. Let that haunt them longer." So she stayed, sat tall, ate her sandwich, and haunted them. The school bell rang like a slap at the end of the day, sharp, dismissive, uninterested in what had been endured inside its walls. Layla walked to her locker without hurry. She moved with the same steady rhythm she had learned from Kata, each step anchored, each gesture deliberate. She wasn't rushing to escape. She had decided she would not run. When she opened her locker, a sticky note fluttered out. One word. Monkey. Black ink, all caps, the Y curled like a sneer. She stood there, blinking, not in surprise, but in calculation. A breath. 2. She folded the note once, then twice, and tucked it inside the sleeve of her hoodie. From behind, someone was watching. She didn't turn, but she felt it, the same electricity that buzzed through dojo mats before a spar. A presence waiting, hoping for a reaction, hoping she'd explode, give them a show. But Layla didn't. Instead, she turned around slowly and locked eyes with Jenna, the girl with the blonde ponytail and perfectly practiced smile. She leaned against a row of lockers like it was a stage. "You okay?" Jenna asked, voice sugared with concern too sweet to swallow. "I heard some people have been unkind." Layla stared at her. Her lips curled, slightly, not a smile, not sarcasm, just acknowledgement. "Yeah," Layla said quietly. "Some people." Jenna blinked, unprepared for the absence of fury. She had come for a fire and got fog. The hallway grew quieter as a few students lingered nearby, pretending to text, pretending not to record. Layla didn't give them more. She turned away. As she walked down the hall, her phone buzzed. A DM from an anonymous account. No words, just the same photo. And beneath it a thumbs-up emoji. She stopped. In the middle of the hallway, for the first time, she let herself feel it fully, not the humiliation, but the control they tried to steal. And then she did something they didn't expect. She turned her phone off. Not just the screen, the whole thing. She slid it into her backpack, zipped it shut, and walked out of the building with her chin high, not defiant, but untouchable. They had watched her, ridiculed her, photographed her without consent. But they hadn't taken her voice. They had never heard it. They'd only seen her silence. And now, that silence was a mirror showing them who they really were. It started with a shove that wasn't really a shove. Not the kind you could report. Not the kind that left bruises or broken bones. Just a little too much shoulder in the hallway. A backpack accidentally swung wide. A sneaker that just happened to trip hers near the vending machine. It was Friday, Spirit Week. The halls were loud, decorated in red and gold streamers. Teachers wearing school merch. Students running on sugar and entitlement. Layla didn't wear red. She wore her hoodie. Gray, clean, unbothered. She had grown used to the choreography of aggression, how it tiptoed just outside the boundaries of rules. But today, something was different. She felt it in the way the crowd parted for her. Not with respect, but in anticipation. Like something had been planned. Like she was the last to know. After fourth period, she walked toward the quad. The sun was sharp, casting long shadows. A group had gathered near the edge of the field. Tyler, Jenna, some of the track boys, a few girls from cheer, laughing, loudly, watching her. As she passed, someone tossed a bottle cap. It bounced off her shoe. She kept walking. Another boy, big, loud, quarterback energy, called out, "Yo, Layla, teach me some kung fu. Or is it karate? What's the difference again?" Laughter. She turned her head slightly, just enough to register them, not enough to engage. Then came the moment. He lunged, not a real punch, but a quick, jerking motion, arm raised, like he was going to slap her shoulder. A fake out, a dare. And Layla moved. Fluid, instinct. One pivot, one step off center. She caught his wrist midair, redirected it behind his back in a perfect, controlled lock. His face hit air, his balance disappeared. He landed hard on the grass, stunned. It took 3 seconds. Everything went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Layla let go. Slowly. She stepped back, breathing steady, heart calm. Her hoodie still zipped. No sweat. No rage. Just readiness. The boy scrambled up, red-faced, muttering, "Damn. What the hell?" She didn't respond. A teacher rushed over. "Mr. Carver." His voice was already louder than needed. "What's going on here, Layla? Did you push him?" The crowd perked up. Layla looked at the teacher, then at the boy. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and simply said no. But the way she stood, the stillness in her frame, the sharpness of her eyes spoke volumes more than any apology or defense ever could. She wasn't sorry. She was ready. And they were the ones who weren't. The principal's office smelled like lemon-scented guilt and old coffee. The kind of place where voices echoed even when they didn't rise above a whisper. Layla sat in the middle chair. Not the one by the window, the one directly across from the desk. The one meant for confrontation, not comfort. Mr. Ellis, the assistant principal, sat behind the desk, hands folded like a sermon. Ms. Weaver, the counselor, perched on the edge of the chair beside him. Her face was softer, but her eyes were scanning, studying Layla, the way people study animals in a zoo, exhibit curious, but cautious. "So," Mr. Ellis began, voice dipped in faux concern, "can you tell us what happened out there today?" Layla tilted her head. "He pretended to hit me. I moved." "You moved or you attacked?" he asked. Layla didn't blink. "I used a basic self-defense technique. No one was hurt." Ms. Weaver chimed in, gently. "Layla, we understand things can feel intense when you're different." Different. There it was. Not black. Not targeted. Just different. The polite code word for not like us. Mr. Ellis leaned forward. The other students described it as aggressive, intimidating. "You're physically strong, Layla. That can be scary for some." She clenched her fists under the desk. Not because of anger, but because of the insult tucked inside the compliment. Scary. Not skilled, not measured, not trained, just scary. The same way her mother had once been called hostile for raising her voice during a town hall meeting. The same way her uncle had been pulled over for matching a description. Layla spoke evenly. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hit anyone. I defended myself. That's what I've been taught to do." Mr. Ellis sighed, as if reason exhausted him. "We're not here to debate. We're here to talk about consequences." There it was. She had followed all the rules. Still, the rules bent against her. 3-day suspension, he said flatly. "We have to maintain a safe environment for all students." All students, but not her. Layla nodded once. She stood. As she reached the door, Ms. Weaver added softly, "Maybe think about how your silence can be misread. Sometimes saying nothing speaks too loud." Layla turned, and for the first time she smiled. Not out of amusement. Out of clarity. Because if her silence was too loud, then maybe it was finally being heard. The house was quiet when Layla walked in. Not the quiet of absence, but of waiting. The kind that wraps around you like a question you're not ready to answer. Layla Monroe was at the kitchen sink, peeling sweet potatoes with surgical precision. The TV was on low in the background, old jazz humming through static. Layla set her backpack down gently. No slamming. No drama. Her mother didn't turn. "Suspended?" Tanya asked, her voice steady, like she was asking about the weather. 3 days, Layla replied. No explanation, no defense, just fact. Tanya nodded once. She placed the peeled potato into a bowl of water and picked up another. Her hands moved rhythmically like she was kneading tension into submission. Layla waited. She expected disappointment, maybe even one of those long, drawn-out talks about image, perception, being the bigger person. The things black mothers often had to say, not because they believed in them, but because they knew how the world worked. But Tanya said nothing. Instead, she turned off the water, dried her hands, and poured 2 cups of tea. One for herself, one for Layla. They sat across from each other at the table, 2 mirrors. Same shoulders, same calm exterior, same fire stitched quietly under the ribs. Finally, Tanya asked, "What did he do?" "He faked a hit," I countered. Tanya took a sip of tea. "You used what I taught you." Layla nodded. "Exactly." Tanya leaned back. Her eyes searched her daughter's face. Not for guilt, for alignment. "You didn't hurt him." "No, just redirected him." Another pause. "Good." "That was all?" Layla exhaled. Not relief, just release. But then Tanya added, "Just remember, baby, when we fight the way they expect us to, we lose even when we win." Layla looked up. "So what am I supposed to do? Let them come for me and stand still?" "No," Tanya said. "You move, but not always with your hands. You use your mind, your breath, your silence. You let them think you're unarmed, and then you outlast them." They sat in silence for a while. Then Layla asked, "Do you ever get tired?" Tanya smiled softly. "Every day. But tired don't mean I stop. It means I rest, reset, then go again." Layla nodded slowly. "I think I'm tired too." Her mother reached across the table, placed her hand over Layla's. "Then rest, but don't let them think they took something." Layla looked into her mother's eyes, and for the first time that week, she didn't feel alone. She felt armed, not with fists, but with a legacy. By Monday, the story had already been told, just not by her. She snapped. She lost it. I heard she slammed him. She's got anger issues, like low-key violent. The words floated through the halls like perfume spilled on tile sweet to the speaker, suffocating to the subject. Layla walked with her hoodie up, not because she was hiding, but because it gave her somewhere to place her focus on breath, on cloth against skin, on warmth that wasn't judgmental. In the main office, her name was no longer whispered. It was logged, recorded, filed, a folder in a drawer under disciplinary. She was now data. It didn't matter that there was no bruise, no injury, just a boy embarrassed in front of his friends. That, apparently, was enough to tip the scale. And in the teacher's lounge, Ms. Caro, the one who taught literature but always locked her door between classes, was heard saying, "I've had students like her before. Brilliant, but volatile. You can see it in the way they hold tension." The word echoed. Layla sat in the back of math class. She solved every problem on the board without needing to show her work. But the teacher, a wiry man who wore bow ties with too much confidence, called on her less now. She had become complicated. Too quiet to trust. Too calm to read. In the cafeteria, she felt it in the way chairs angled away from her table, in how eyes flicked up, then quickly back down. Even the girl who once asked to borrow her pencil walked past her like she no longer existed. She hadn't been suspended for violence. She had been suspended for disrupting the story. Because Layla Monroe, the quiet black girl who never raised her voice, was supposed to be safe, background, peripheral, not someone who could drop a boy twice her size in 3 seconds and still walk away without blinking. And now she was a threat. Not because she had hurt someone, but because she had proven she could. She remembered her mother's words, "They won't always punish you for what you do. Sometimes, they'll punish you for what you're capable of." Layla hadn't just acted. She had reminded them of a truth they didn't want to face. That their power was conditional. And hers wasn't. "Layla, can you step into my office for a moment?" Miss Weaver's voice rang soft and polished, like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. She stood at the doorway of Layla's English class, smiling in that half-sympathetic way reserved for difficult conversations. Layla rose from her desk, all eyes following her, some with curiosity, others with relief. Even the teacher avoided her gaze, as if guilt might be contagious. The walk down the hallway was quiet, too quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed above them like a warning. Miss Weaver didn't speak until they entered her office, where motivational posters lined the walls in bright, empty slogans. "Be the best version of you. Kindness is free. Sprinkle that stuff everywhere. Layla sat. Ms. Weaver took the chair across from her, notebook in hand. I wanted to check in. She began. After everything that's happened, I just thought it might be helpful to talk. Layla said nothing. I know the last few days haven't been easy, Ms. Weaver continued, but it's important that we reflect on how we respond to conflict, especially when we're in environments where we're under a microscope. There it was again. As if Layla had volunteered to be watched, as if it were part of the curriculum. I responded appropriately. Layla said, calm and firm. Ms. Weaver nodded. Too quickly. And that's good. But perception matters. Layla, especially for young women of color. Sometimes silence can be misinterpreted as defiance, or worse, hostility. Layla's face didn't move, but her stomach turned. Do you think I was hostile? She asked. Ms. Weaver hesitated, not intentionally, but some students felt intimidated. Intimidated? Another code word. Layla folded her hands in her lap, the way her mother taught her to sit when the world confused authority with fairness. You mean because I didn't cry or yell or explain myself? Ms. Weaver offered a sympathetic smile, the kind that always came before a suggestion disguised as care. I think if you were a little more open, maybe more approachable, it might help others feel less threatened. Layla blinked. She had heard enough. She stood slowly. I think the problem isn't how I make them feel, she said. It's that I don't feel the need to perform for them. Ms. Weaver opened her mouth, then closed it. Layla adjusted her hoodie, opened the door, and stepped out. The hallway was the same, but she wasn't. They had called her aggressive. But in that moment, all she had done was name what they were too polite to admit. That they feared her not because she was wrong, but because she didn't need their permission to be right. That night, Layla walked home instead of taking the bus. She didn't tell her mother. She just texted walking today. I need air. The sky hung low, heavy with a quiet that matched hers. She passed rows of identical houses with porches lined in fall decor pumpkins, scarecrows, smiling ghosts. Nothing too real, nothing too complicated. Her hoodie sleeves were tugged over her knuckles. Fists balled not in anger, but in thought. Every corner she turned, she replayed the day. Not the words, they were forgettable, but the tone. That tired, curated tone adults used when they weren't angry, just disappointed that you had forced them to show who they really were. She passed a group of boys skateboarding. One of them paused, nudged the other. Yo, that's the girl, the karate chick. Layla kept walking. She reached home, opened the door, and slipped off her shoes without a sound. The house was dim. Her mother was in the garden, humming low. Layla didn't go out to her. Not yet. Instead, she walked to the mirror in the hallway, the one near the old bookcase, where family photos lived. She stood there, looking not at her clothes, not at the braid draped over her shoulder, at her face. It looked the same, but something had shifted. There were traces of fire behind her eyes now, not loud, but constant. And in that moment, she whispered something to herself she hadn't dared say out loud in weeks. I'm not what they say I am. She didn't need to believe it fully yet. She just needed to say it. Upstairs, she pulled out a notebook, the one she'd stopped writing in after the locker room incident. This time, she didn't write a story or a quote. She wrote names. Every name they had called her. Angry, hostile, scary, aggressive. Then, beneath each one, she wrote what she knew they meant. Black, 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 black. And then, under those, she wrote one more word. Unapologetic. She closed the notebook. No tears. No fury. Just presence. They had tried to shame her into shrinking, but instead, they had sharpened her. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to fight back the way they expected. She just had to keep being. Because the more she stood her ground, the more their labels slid off her like rain on steel. They would keep saying her name, not with kindness, not yet, but they would say it. And one day, they would say it with respect. The halls of Riverside High had two kinds of people, those who were seen, and those who saw everything. Mr. Harris was the second kind. He was the janitor, mid-60s, skin the color of bark after rain, keys clinking like soft percussion wherever he walked. Students called him Coach, even though he hadn't coached anything in years. Maybe because he carried himself like someone who had once demanded push-ups with a whistle in his mouth. But mostly, they ignored him. He liked it that way. Because when people ignore you, they forget to lie around you. That Tuesday afternoon, while the students shouted across the quad and the teachers filed reports behind closed doors, Mr. Harris sat alone in the camera room, small, dusty, tucked behind the tech office. The room smelled like warm plastic and boredom. He sipped lukewarm coffee from a thermos that had been his since '98 and clicked through footage on the school's security system. He wasn't looking for anything, but something found him. There it was, the quad, Friday, red and gold streamers, Spirit Week noise. Layla Monroe walking past the crowd. Then the boy lunging. Then Layla moving clean, sharp, decisive. The boy falling. He paused, rewound, watched again. There was no aggression, no rage, only control. Mr. Harris leaned back, expression unreadable. He'd seen this before, not the move, but the response. He'd seen it in a black cadet punched first, suspended anyway, in a young woman who didn't cry when cornered and was labeled cold, in his own daughter, years ago, when she refused to smile at a customer who called her articulate. They had called Layla intimidating. But the footage told the truth. She was disciplined. He copied the clip to a flash drive. Not because anyone asked him to, not because he wanted praise, but because truth didn't need applause. It just needed someone to carry it. That evening, after final bell, he walked quietly to the main office. The halls were nearly empty, students gone, teachers grading. He knocked on the glass. The receptionist glanced up. "Need something, Coach?" "I got something," he said, "for Mr. Ellis." She raised an eyebrow. "He's in a meeting." "Tell him I'll wait." He took a seat in the corner, thumb resting on the drive in his pocket. And outside the window, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that, for once, pointed not toward accusation, but toward revelation. Mr. Ellis finally opened his office door, glancing into the waiting area like he'd forgotten someone might still be there. "Mr. Harris, everything all right?" The old man stood without rush. "Got something you ought to see." He followed Ellis back into the office. The space smelled of aftershave and paper. Framed degrees lined the wall, next to plaques about excellence in administration and inclusive leadership. Mr. Harris handed him the flash drive. "What's this?" "Footage from Friday, the quad." Ellis paused, fingers hovering. "We've already handled that situation, Mr. Harris." "Handled it," Harris repeated, voice low, without seeing the whole picture. Ellis hesitated, then slid the drive into his laptop. The file blinked open. And there it was, the moment. Again. Unfiltered. Unnarrated. The boy's lunge. Layla's pivot. The lock, the release, the calm. No punches, no hostility. Only instinct, control, precision. Ellis watched it twice. Then he leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Well, that's clearer than what the students described." Mr. Harris said nothing. "I mean, she still put her hands on someone," Ellis added, as if trying to balance fairness on a tightrope of liability. Mr. Harris tilted his head slightly. "You ever served, sir?" Ellis looked up. "No." "I did," Harris said. "So did Layla's mama. I can tell in the way that girl moves, she don't move unless she's got to. That wasn't aggression. That was protection." Ellis shifted in his chair. Even so, we can't ignore how others perceived. That's the problem. Harris interrupted softly, but firmly. You're not punishing what she did. You're punishing how they felt about it. The silence sat heavy between them. Ellis rubbed his chin. I'll have to bring this up with the district. You do that, Harris said. But know this, if that were my granddaughter, I'd want someone to speak up, not because she asked, but because it's right. He turned toward the door, paused. Sometimes the loudest voice ain't the one that shouts. It's the one that don't back down. He left without waiting for a thank you. Ellis sat at his desk, replaying the footage again. And for the first time since Friday, he saw Layla Monroe not as a discipline case, but as something harder to manage. A mirror, reflecting back everything the school claimed to be and everything it still wasn't. Wednesday morning. The air was cool, the kind that made you pull your sleeves down just a little further, even if the sun had started rising strong. Layla walked through the front gate of Riverside High like she had every other day, head steady, shoulders level. But something felt different. Not better, just shifted. The stairs were still there. Yes. But they were quieter now, less certain. The whispers had grown more hesitant, like people weren't sure where the boundary was anymore. Maybe because someone had drawn a line. She felt it most clearly in class, when Ms. Caro, literature teacher and habitual boundary tiptoer, called on her for the first time in weeks. Not with warmth, but with respectful distance, like someone who had touched a hot stove once and learned better. In the cafeteria, her table was still empty. But there were fewer phones angled her way now, fewer snickers when she stood. She didn't know why. Not yet. After lunch, Layla was walking toward the East Wing, headphones in, but no music playing when she saw him. Mr. Harris, kneeling near a hallway radiator, tightening a screw with that same unhurried motion he applied to everything. Students passed him without noticing. But Layla. She paused. He glanced up. Their eyes met. No smiles. No speeches. Just a moment. Then he nodded. Not an everything's okay nod. Not a good job nod. A you still here nod. They didn't break you nod. Layla nodded back. That was all. But something in her chest loosened just slightly. Not relief. Something older than that. Something like recognition. She walked on. That afternoon, in gym class, Coach Martinez announced a self-defense unit would begin next week. Real-life skills, he said. Not just sports. Layla's name was on the list of demonstration assistants. She hadn't signed up. But somehow, she was on it. When she looked up from the clipboard, Coach Martinez gave her a glance that said, "Not my idea." But I didn't argue either. And Layla smiled, small, brief, but real. Because power wasn't always about making noise. Sometimes, it was about staying still long enough for the world to adjust itself around your presence. Sometimes it was knowing that the most powerful thing you could be was undeniable. It started with an email Layla almost didn't open. Subject line: Student Voice Initiative. You've been recommended. She stared at it for a full minute before clicking. The body of the message was full of polished school-speak: community healing. Peer role model. We would be honored. They wanted her to speak. At the all-student assembly? On resilience. Layla almost laughed. Almost. Not because it was funny, but because she knew it wasn't really about her voice. Not truly. It was about their optics. About the school needing to clean the mirror she'd held up to their face without breaking it. She left the email unread for 2 days. On the third day, Ms. Weaver caught her after last bell. I know you got the email, she said gently. We don't want to pressure you, but a lot of students look up to you now. Layla raised an eyebrow. Do they? She asked. Ms. Weaver hesitated. They see your strength, even if they don't know how to name it. Layla didn't promise anything. That night, over dinner, Tanya asked, You gonna speak? Layla chewed slowly, swallowed. I don't think they want to hear me. They just want to say they let me talk. Her mother stirred her tea. Then don't talk. Say something they can't interrupt. Layla looked at her and nodded. Friday, assembly day. The gym was packed. Bleachers groaned under the weight of students, teachers, staff. The overhead lights buzzed like flies. School colors everywhere. Laughter, boredom, phones hidden in sleeves. No one expecting much. When Layla's name was called, there was a pause in the noise. Then claps, scattered, curious. She walked to the center of the gym floor, dressed in all black hoodie, leggings, barefoot. No mic, no podium, just space. Whispers began. Where's the speech? Is this part of it? She took one breath, another, and began to move. Slow, deliberate, controlled. Akata. Each motion carved like poetry in the air. A story in silence. Elbow block, step, twist, guard. Not a performance. A presence? The gym hushed. Even the squeak of sneakers and rustle of jackets faded. In that space, Layla was not a student. She was evidence. Of training. Of survival. Of refusal. Refusal to be reduced. Refusal to be erased. And somewhere, between a palm strike and a half spin, a truth landed in the room. She didn't need to be heard. She only needed to be seen. Layla moved with the steadiness of tidewater, pulling the room into rhythm without ever raising her voice. Her arms swept through the air, sharp and graceful. Her breath rose and fell in patterns older than memory. A block, a pivot, a pause. And just as the murmurs began to rise, a sound. Not hers, but hers. Her voice suddenly spilled from the gym's overhead speakers, quiet at first, then unmistakable, recorded, composed, played with intention. The kata never paused, but the voice filled the space between her movements. They said I was too quiet. They said I was too calm. They said silence made them uncomfortable, but they never asked what I heard in the quiet. A sweep, a block, a strike held in place. I heard them deciding who I was before I opened my mouth. I heard them laughing when they thought I wasn't listening. I heard the snap of phone cameras like traps closing. Layla twisted, dropped low, rose again. The voice continued. They asked why I didn't smile. They asked where I was from. They asked if I was okay when what they meant was, "You're making us uncomfortable." The audience was frozen now. No phones out. No giggles. Even the teachers sat still. I never wanted to fight. I just wanted to exist. But when existence is seen as threat, a slow spin, a firm stance. Then standing still is resistance. Layla opened her palm. Closed it. I didn't move because I was angry. I moved because I was trained. Because black girls like me are always expected to break. Her final kata motion, hands crossed in front of her chest, then slowly uncurling open, vulnerable, steady. But I didn't break. I balanced, and I'm still here. Silence. True silence. The kind that lingers after something holy. Layla bowed once, then turned, and walked off the gym floor barefoot, unbothered, unstoppable. Not one teacher spoke. Not one student whispered, because in that moment they understood. They hadn't witnessed a performance. They had witnessed a testimony. And it didn't need applause. It needed remembering. When Layla stepped off the gym floor, she didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The silence behind her said more than any clapping ever could. It was the hush of a room where truth had passed through like wind, no damage, no explosion, but everything felt rearranged. She made her way to the locker hallway, her bare feet landing soundless on the tile. Behind her, the students slowly unfroze. A few clapped cautiously, then stopped. The kind of applause people give when they're not sure whether they're allowed to be moved. One teacher, Coach Martinez, stood up fully, hands in his pockets. He didn't clap. He just nodded. In the third row, a girl with strawberry blonde curls blinked fast. Jenna. She didn't look smug anymore. She looked studied, like someone realizing they hadn't prepared for the test that just arrived, and failed it. Later that day, Layla sat under the jacaranda tree behind the cafeteria. The purple blossoms had started to fall, dotting the grass like tiny wounds. A shadow fell over her. She didn't look up. Then came a voice, soft, uncertain. "Hey, that was something." Layla turned. It was Jessica, the girl who once shifted her seat away in biology. Her face was flush, but her hands were steady. "I mean, I didn't get all of it," Jessica said. "But I felt it." Layla raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't asking you to," she said. Jessica nodded, half smiling. "Yeah, I figured." She turned to leave, but then stopped. "I think what you did, it mattered, even if not everyone says it." Layla didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because something had shifted, not in Jessica, maybe, but in the space between them. In the staff lounge, the teachers were quiet too. No one criticized the assembly. But no one praised it out loud, either. "Powerful," Miss Weaver murmured, stirring her tea too slowly. Mr. Ellis said nothing, but later that night, he replayed the voiceover on his laptop. Twice. At home, Tanya was waiting with a bowl of rice and grilled chicken. No grand speeches, just food, just presence. Layla sat. They ate. Then Tanya broke the silence. "I heard there was an assembly today." Layla smirked. "I guess there was." Tanya took a bite. Then said, without looking up, "Did you tell the truth?" Layla nodded. "Good," her mother replied. "Then whatever they felt belongs to them." That night, Layla slept with the window open. And the wind didn't whisper forgiveness. It whispered respect. The Monday after the assembly smelled like dust and lavender disinfectant. Lockers slammed. Bells rang. Gossip moved in nervous zigzags, quick to start, quicker to shift direction. But when Layla walked in, everything felt slower. Not because people had changed, but because she had. Her hoodie was still gray, her braids still long. But the way she carried herself chin high, shoulders relaxed, eyes soft but focused was different. Not defensive. Not afraid. Just not present. And presence, when worn with confidence by a black girl, always changes the room. Some students gave her space. Not in fear, but in unfamiliarity. The kind that comes when you realize someone you thought you knew, someone you underestimated, was far more than your projections. One girl, Emma, from chemistry, offered a smile. A real one. Brief. Not performative. Layla nodded. That was enough. In biology, she took her usual seat. This time, no one scooted their chair away. No one whispered. Tyler, the boy who once cracked jokes under his breath, kept his gaze fixed on his notebook like it might save him. Mr. Bowen asked a question. Layla raised her hand. He called on her without hesitation. That was new. She answered. Her voice was even, clear. There was no applause. No echo of reverence. Just normalcy. And that was exactly what made it radical. Because Layla wasn't being treated like a problem anymore. She was being treated like a person. In the hallway between classes, she passed Jenna. The girl looked at her. Eyes flicked up, then down. This time, there was no smirk, no fake smile. Just acknowledgement. Jenna said nothing. Layla didn't expect her to. She didn't need closure from those who had never opened themselves in the first place. And yet, in the space between them, something passed. A shift. Not peace, but perhaps the beginning of irrelevance. And that, too, was power. By lunch, Layla sat at her usual table near the windows, alone. Yes, but not isolated. Across the room, A freshman girl, dark-skinned, tiny, with a nervous backpack grip, glanced at her, then looked again, then sat nearby, not close, just within range. Layla noticed, didn't speak, but she moved her tray slightly, made space. Sometimes, change doesn't announce itself. It just sits quietly beside you, waiting to breathe. The basement smelled the same eucalyptus oil, old pine, faint traces of lavender from Tanya's cleaning ritual. The mat was still worn at the edges. The heavy bag still swung gently from the low beam, like it never stopped remembering. But the air had shifted, because Layla was no longer just training. She was teaching. It had started with a simple request. Tanya, over breakfast, had said, the little neighbor girl Nia. Right, her mom called. Said she's been having a hard time at school. She saw your assembly. Wants to learn what you do. Layla had raised an eyebrow. What I do? Tanya smirked, buttering toast. Move without flinching. At first, Layla had resisted. She wasn't a teacher. She was still figuring it out herself. But that afternoon, when Nia showed up at the door, small, wide-eyed, hoodie 2 sizes too big, Layla said yes before she even realized she meant it. Now, here they were. Nia stood barefoot at the edge of the mat, knees wobbly, unsure. Layla stood across from her, hands relaxed at her sides. Okay, Layla said, voice calm. We're not going to learn how to hit today. Nia blinked. We're not. Nope. She stepped forward. We're going to learn how to stand. She taught her how to plant her feet shoulder-width apart, how to breathe from her stomach, not her chest, how to keep her hands open but firm, how to hold her gaze not in defiance, but in awareness. Nia struggled at first, fidgeted, laughed nervously, apologized for everything. Layla didn't scold her. She just repeated the movements, softly, patiently, until, slowly, Nia's body began to memorize something her heart hadn't believed yet. That she deserved space. That she didn't have to shrink. That silence could be a stance, not just a shield. After 20 minutes, they sat on the mat, sipping water. Nia looked up. You weren't scared that day at school. Layla thought about it. She thought about the cameras, the comments, the suspension, the look in Mr. Ellis's eyes, the email that didn't say sorry, just said community values. And then she said but I knew something scarier. Nia tilted her head. What? Layla smiled. Letting them decide who I am. The girl nodded slowly, like she didn't understand fully, but maybe, one day, she would. They stood again. Layla demonstrated the first step of a kata. Nia mirrored her. Awkward. Crooked. Brave. And in that basement room where silence had once been her training ground, Layla discovered a truth stronger than defense. That when you teach another girl to stand, you rise again, too. The last day of school came without fanfare. No parade of goodbyes, no streamers, no senior send-off, just the soft thud of locker doors closing one last time, sneakers squeaking across waxed floors, and the muffled joy of students already thinking about summer. Layla didn't make a speech. She didn't sign yearbooks. She didn't decorate her locker. Instead, she arrived early, walked the halls once, slowly. Let her fingers trail across the row of beige lockers like saying goodbye to a place that never quite held her, but shaped her all the same. Teachers offered her nods, some awkward, some genuine. Mr. Bowen gave a stiff smile and a quiet, "Good luck out there." She didn't answer, just nodded back. In the main office, Ms. Weaver handed her a small manila envelope. "Final report card," she said, "and a letter from the district. Your disciplinary record's been cleared." Layla raised an eyebrow. "We reviewed the footage," Ms. Weaver added, voice hushed, almost embarrassed. "It helped." Layla took the envelope without comment. "No thank you." No resentment. Just presence. Outside, the sun painted the sidewalk in long shadows. She found Tanya waiting in the car, windows down, jazz playing low. "You done?" her mother asked. Layla slid in, leaned her head back, eyes closed. "I think I've just started." They didn't drive off immediately. Just sat there for a moment, engine quiet, time suspended. And then from the corner of her eye, Layla saw movement. A group of students across the parking lot, the freshman girl, Nia, among them. When their eyes met, Nia gave the smallest bow palms pressed together, like in kata. Layla bowed back, barely perceptible. But enough. Because sometimes, a legacy isn't a statue or a plaque or a speech. Sometimes it's a posture. A breath. A pause that teaches others how to carry themselves differently. And as the car pulled away from Riverside High, Layla didn't look back. She didn't need to. The school would remember her. Not in hallways. Not in policy. But in the way silence moved differently after her. They had tried to name her with fear. But she had named herself. With restraint. With dignity. With stillness that cut deeper than rage. She wasn't loud. She wasn't soft. She was undeniable. And sometimes, the greatest act of resistance is to walk away, still standing. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.